Welcome to Class 3. We will be covering these two topics today: Assistive Technology Assessment and Matching Technology to the Assistive Technology User. Assistive Technology Assessment. A couple things to discuss before we dive deeper into assessment. A little bit of this is review. First of all, it's the goal, not the tool. So Assistive Technology Assessment can be pretty informal and pretty quick to pretty complex and take weeks, months, and sometimes even years. So one of the important pieces to put at the center of our assessment process is, what is the goal? What can the child do, and where would we like the child to go, or what skills would we like them to improve or compensate for? I had you read an article by Dr. Dave Edinburgh. He is a wonderful person, and I've gotten to see him present one time. I have read, I would like to think, almost everything that he has published. If you enjoyed his article and felt like it was pretty accessible, you might consider picking up more of his work in the future. You could certainly just put his last name into Google Scholar, and you would probably pull up many articles that are accessible for free, or of course through your academic library. Briefly in the article, he made a point about a child. He told a story about a child who had fallen off a tractor and lost their arm, just like me. Just kidding. That's not how I lost my arm. I was born like that. But I like to think that sometimes he's telling a story about me. So the child falls off the tractor, and there's an immediate response in terms of supporting that child. We don't put that child back in class. Let's say that child lost their right arm. Their right arm is their writing hand. And now the child starts earning Fs because they are learning how to write with their left hand, or learning how to type, or even voice type, or compensate in some way. Instead, we understand immediately that this child probably will need some direct instruction, that he will be writing in some alternative way than he was before the accident. However, sitting right next to that child is a child who's been struggling to write for several years, yet we have not intervened. So we have not allowed this child any access to an alternative tool or an alternative way to write. What it really says to me is that we've come a long way in assistive technology in terms of being able to identify and support disabilities that we can see with our eyes. It's much easier for us to think about prosthetic limbs and legs and wheelchairs and eyeglasses and hearing aids, and much more difficult for us to think about things that impact executive functioning or attention or memory or other cognitive processes or even communication. So he makes a really good point about this sort of remediation versus compensation, and that it really doesn't need to be an and/or problem, that it can be both. I put Carol Dweck's work, Growth Mindset, next. Many of you, I'm sure, are familiar with her work. Growth mindset is a pretty hot topic right now. In order for us to meaningfully facilitate a growth mindset in classrooms and within children, we need to think about the kinds of barriers we might leave in place for kids for an extended period of time, and the way that those would erode or create a barrier to that child really understanding and believing that they can grow. And then I put culture here around Vygotsky, that oftentimes because of some of our cultural beliefs around ability and disability and what it means to be able-bodied, we ourselves might be some of the biggest barriers to our students getting the assistive technologies that they need. All right, assistive technology assessment is formative, and I had put that up in red in parentheses too, just to remind us that it's really about improving function. And it's typically a very iterative process. We rarely get it right on the first try. We have to have a really open mind to be trying things, to have lots of stakeholders and partners helping us figure out exactly what will be the best match for the child. And then our children grow and change. So oftentimes we might address a goal, but the goal will change and the child's abilities will change. And so how we support a child with a piece of assistive technology is likely a moving target. After we have a piece of assistive technology in place or strategy in place, we can then evaluate the technology for its effectiveness once it's in place. And we can do more of a summative, if you will, assessment of whether or not we have truly addressed the goal that we intended to address. Just a reminder that universal design for learning can reduce the need for assistive technology for kids. There are certain assistive technologies that we don't really intend UDL to address, things like the need for a wheelchair or the need for glasses or the need for hearing aids or certain kinds of other personalized assistive technologies, but certainly things for being able to read or being able to write or even for individuals who might use a wheelchair, making sure that they are able to access, every aspect of a room or every aspect of an activity that all the other kids are able to access. But assistive technology can definitely reduce kind of this high level, intensive, expensive, right? It's expensive, not just the technology, but in the time and the energy and the people that it takes in order to be able to address assistive technology needs, which is also one of the barriers and one of the reasons that assistive technology is not used as often as it should be. So I want to begin by putting the assistive technology user at the center as the most important person. I think this is no duh. Of course, the assistive technology, you're focused on them, you're thinking about them, you're identifying the goal, you're looking at their strengths and weaknesses. But one of the most important things that gets missed, and there are decades of research supporting this, is that we forget to simply sit the AT user down and say, what do you want? What do you need? How do we do this together? That this is a very collaborative problem solving, that collaborative problem solving really is the only method that can truly put assistive technology in place. So there's a lot of due to kids. Well, it looks like he needs text-to-speech, so I'm going to turn on text-to-speech and I'm going to tell him to use it. Well, let's think about this. Let's give some options. Let's demonstrate its use. Let's let lots of kids play with it at once. What are some of the things that we can do to kind of, again, put the child at the center and have them be really able to articulate what it is that they do well and that what it is that they need support doing. For some of you might be thinking of our children with much more significant disabilities, maybe even communication difficulties. It might be very difficult for us to have this sort of just kind of straight up conversation about what do you want. But we can certainly play around with giving the child lots and lots and lots of choices and really looking at affect and joy and engagement in terms of supporting what we ultimately select to support them with assistive technology. So in the beginning of the course, I talked about that off-the-shelf technology may carry less stigma. Off-the-shelf technology is not always available. However, there's kind of been a big controversy out there around like dedicated speech and language pathology, AAC device. I don't know why I said speech and language pathology, I'm sorry. Dedicated augmentative and alternative communication devices like a Dynavox or a Vantage or a GoTalk versus something like an iPad or an iTouch or a tablet. And my field of augmentative and alternative communication and even speech and language pathology has been pretty slow to embrace the off-the-shelf technologies. And if you were to read some of the research around the selection of AAC devices. However, if we put our children at the center, they are often going to choose a device that potentially has less bells and whistles, but looks a lot more like the communication equipment or the equipment that their friends are using, their parents are using, people on the subway are using. That technology carries less stigma. So for us to sort of again, put ourselves in the shoes of the child and say what is going to be meaningful to the child. It's going to be very difficult to learn to use an augmentative and alternative communication system. How do we lower the floors and make it easier for this child to engage with this piece of technology? Another thing to think about, the task cannot become harder because of the technology, and I just put the KISS here, the keep it simple, stupid principle here. So for an example, what I see often is requiring a child gets a brand new iPad, we put ProLiQ to go on it, sit down at snack, and now the child has to say, I want chip, and they get one chip. And then they have to say it again, I want chip, and they get another chip. Or they have to say, I want more, and they get another chip. However, if they can simply point to the chip and all those speaking kids don't have to ask for each chip, then we've just made the use of the AAC device much more complicated than using a more natural gesture like point. And you will, if you wonder then why the device doesn't get used after snack or throughout the rest of the day, is because we've just shown that when I pull out the device, I actually make it harder for you to communicate than it was without the device. So we need to think about that. Assistive technology should be making the task easier, quicker, more efficient, or else the child's not going to adopt it. And we have to be honest that you nor I would adopt a piece of technology that made a task more difficult if we used it. So students don't experience disability in every situation or equally throughout the day. So a student might not need any support in physical education, but require the use of text-to-speech when asked to read print beyond a 4th grade reading level or in a time situation. So therefore, we really need to think about this idea that technology is not necessary at all times, and that there are different technology needs depending on the class. This can be a problem when we have a child who has 3 or 4 or even 7 teachers and only one come to the IEP. Therefore, it's difficult for all of the different teachers to understand the varying and different role that they play in supporting the child and using technology. There's a process called the SET process that is one of the ways that you can address this, and we'll be talking in the next class about what that is. Okay, the next thing is the importance of the assistive technology user's family. Again, decades of research about the importance of including the family, not just in the IEP process, but in the assessment process. Technology really does have a value, and it can have a value which is, it can have social capital attached to it, and it can also have stigma, or actually take social capital away. So how does the family value the technology? Do they know why it's important? Do they share your same need to meet those goals with the child? Do they know how to use it? So we have a lot of children who use, and I keep going back to augmentative and alternative communication because it is one of the more complex pieces of technology that we support kids with. Oftentimes, the child only uses AAC at school, and this is a huge problem. Do they know how to promote it at home, right? So again, not just using it at snack time, making a task more difficult, but how do we make this something that's fun and engaging and exciting and promotes relationships and giggling at home? I know that sounds kind of sappy, but true. How does their perspective play a role in how the technology is chosen? So if you've got a family and the whole family uses Android products with Android apps, and you put the kid on an iPad with iTunes apps, have we just made it very difficult for the family to basically understand how to support the child with a technology that they're not necessarily familiar with, that they don't have an account for, that they can't transfer their apps over to, etc. But just things to think about. Or does it, and also does the technology go home? So are we teaching a child a skill that they can only use in school because the technology doesn't go home? And how effective will that truly be in having that child meet this goal? Does the child need to do homework? I know certainly for communication, they need to be able to communicate across environments. If we don't have buy-in from the family, we will likely have our pieces of technology just be another one for our research around technology that gets abandoned. So once you define the goal, how do you know what is available? And I know the article that I asked you to read by Dr. Edinburgh had some links in there to technology. And some of those links, that technology is now antiquated, is no longer supported, doesn't work, because technology is moving so quickly, as we all know. How do you become knowledgeable about what's out there? So obviously one is this class, but again, in a 1-credit class, I'm already feeling quite stressed that I'm not able to impart all that I know about what is out there in a short period of time, and especially when there's so many assistive technology domains. So one is to subscribe to a journal, or try to get your school or your district to subscribe to a journal that then A lot of times it can be delivered electronically and then it can be shared out. Google Scholar, of course, going into Google and just typing in text to speech, speech to text, specific types of AT for memory, etc., or having access, as you do probably now, to an academic library. And then there's some websites. There's some pretty amazing stuff here. So the Tech Matrix and Able Data both are websites where you can go to and you can type in things like memory, attention, communication, and it will give you a whole list of products. You can do quite a bit of sorting. But just because you know what the product is doesn't necessarily mean that you understand, is it a quality product? Is it going to work? Many products will allow you, if you contact the company, will allow you to borrow them. I've already had you look at the Oregon Technology Access Program's lending library. It certainly does not contain every piece of technology you could potentially want to trial with a child. Sometimes you can trial technology that's very similar to the technology that you want to get sort of the essence that that's what you need for a child. But it is a lot of, it's very creative. Can you, anyway, so looking at also Googling something, right, and going to images. Pinterest, actually, I should have put on here, is pretty amazing in terms of people who have curated lots of technologies, off-the-shelf technologies, things that they've created themselves. Cast is an excellent website for resources, and then I put mine on here. It's a little bit out of date. I get busy and it gets neglected, but I really try to curate resources in areas, again, memory, communication, attention, reading, writing, math, so you can just quickly link on apps. A lot of times there's light versions of apps. You can try it for a little while before you think about paying for the full app. Social media, I also have a Facebook page. If you join this Facebook page, we don't become friends. I don't get to see what you ate for dinner, or you don't get to see what I ate for dinner. I know Facebook's kind of for old people. I'm kind of old. But I try then, from all the different sources that I get information on technology on, to then push technology over to that page. So it might just be a nice way to just have some different ideas drop into your social media feed. Continuing education, if you like this topic, you could certainly consider becoming ResNest certified. I believe most of the training's online. The tests cost several $100s, but you would get a much deeper understanding and training of assistive technology. The Oregon Technology Access Program, as I've mentioned, already has a library. However, it also has an annual conference, which is an excellent conference, and it also has trainings, regional trainings, putting together assistive technology teams and processes, and we'll talk a little bit more of that later in the class. But it is a local resource that could potentially provide a lot of continuing education and access to more stuff. So I guess I would say I use multiple methods for trying to maintain relevant. I can actually sort of have heart palpitations when something comes across my Facebook feed that I've never seen before. But I have to keep letting myself know that I'm not always going to know everything the minute that it's released and and I'm also not really practicing with students in the field, so it can be a huge challenge. We'll talk a little bit more about funding in the next class, because that's another huge barrier is how do I trial a whole bunch of stuff when everything potentially costs a lot of money. All right, so quality indicators for assistive technology. We actually call it QUIAT, I think, or QUIAT. I think they call it QUIAT is the acronym, QIAT. I just wanted to show this to you because this is, these are all hyperlinked. When you have the slides, you can access all of these hyperlinks. But what this is, you can also buy the book. but you don't need to buy the book because all of the resources are on the website for free. But this is really for a school or a district to do some reflection and evaluation of what processes they have in place in order to provide assistive technology for students. And some of our districts have many processes in place and would do very well if they were to put themselves through this process, and many districts have. And some districts have never considered this. So it's potentially a tool. Of course, the more kind of infrastructure processes you have in place, it's likely you have more students whose assistive technology needs are being addressed, possibly. So as you can see, it looks at these indicators. What does consideration of assistive technology need in the IEP process really look like? What does the assessment process of assistive technology needs at your school really look like? What does assistive technology in the IEP look like? And next class, when we talk about how to write assistive technology in the IEP or considerations for assistive technology in the IEP, we'll probably open up this document and look at the rubric in terms of what are best practices for writing assistive technology in the IEP? What does assistive technology implementation look like? Evaluation of effectiveness. How soon are we coming back and looking at what we've put in place and evaluating whether we met our goals? Assistive technology around transition. I think a lot of times this is really talking about our kids 16 and over. Administrative support for assistive technology and assistive technology professional development. It's pretty difficult. You could, even if this was a 10 credit class, it would be difficult to become an assistive technology expert and then just remain an expert without continuing ed. So, and then it has the matrices for consideration of everything that I just discussed. So this is a great tool. If you get a chance, go in there and open up some of the PDFs and take a look at what they recommend. So assessment tools, first of all, one of the most important thing is some kind of referral process. So sometimes you will be the most knowledgeable person, and I'm not laughing like you don't deserve it, but you'll be the most knowledgeable person around assistive technology, and other times you'll have access to an assistive technology specialist and or oftentimes speech and language pathologists, occupational therapists, and physical therapists often take on a dual role of SLP plus AT or OT plus AT or something like that, but you usually have an additional person who has put some extra time and energy into becoming and into developing expertise in assistive technology. But not everybody has access to that. And what I've also seen is sometimes children will get assessed for something like specific learning impairment. And because an assistive technology or an occupational therapy are not taking part in the evaluation, then unless the resource specialist has an understanding of assistive technology or has access to an assistive technology specialist, you, the teacher, could get a child in your classroom who you really think needs assistive technology, yet nobody's made that consideration yet. So a lot of the materials and ideas that I've presented to you have come from this Wisconsin Assistive Technology Initiative, which is called WADI. And again, all of these are hyperlinked. You can go to these links. There are quite a few free publications on this website. At one time, WADI was funded. I believe it was funded actually by the federal government. And this information was just kind of the up-to-date, state-of-the-art assistive technology information really for the field. However, it's been several years, and although I think much of this information is relevant, it's definitely a few years out of date. So again, some of the assistive technology that they recommend is no longer supported by the communication we had, the computer systems and tablets that we have, but I guess you can get the idea of sort of what they're going for. So what they have here is they have, if you were to click on each one of these links, so you were concerned, you have some thinking about, you think a child needs some assistive technology and communication or computer access or writing, reading math, you could click on one of these links and it will give you a form of questions to kind of go through and think about for the child. Has the child ever had assistive technology? What kinds of specific, what kinds of strengths do they have? What kinds of areas do you think they need support in? And it starts to offer up some ideas about things that you could try. And again, like I said, they're slightly out of date. If I had more time, I would go through and update every single one of these forms to make them easier to use. But this really gives you a great starting point to be thinking about what kinds of assistive technologies and what kinds of questions would you be thinking about for a specific child in all of the assistive technology domains. What also is on this site are things like assessing students' needs for assistive technology, which actually has many of these pieces in it. Resource guide for teachers and administrations about assistive technology, and all these other resources here. This one might be very helpful as well. Okay, the importance of data. So all of those forms and tools essentially help you gather data in order to make a decision about what types of assistive technology that you would like to trial with a child. You can look at quantitative data, we can look at qualitative data that usually comes from things like observations, interviewing families, students, and teacher input. I think, again, if you were to go through these materials, you would find forms for interviewing teachers, soliciting teacher input. Oftentimes teachers don't have time to sit down, but they can fill out a quick email or a quick questionnaire. Also, the Oregon Technology Access Program has curated many of these forms. You can look at forms from all different states for referral, and look at forms from all different states around questionnaires around assessment and all kinds of questionnaires. And they also have a formal training putting together assistive technology teams at the district level. Okay, importance of a team: teacher, administrator, parent, student, AT specialist, OT, PT, speech, and other. I can't stress enough the importance of a team. I have been arrogant at times in my early career, feeling like, I have the expertise, I can do this, I can go out and assess the child, and I can come back with a recommendation, I can train everybody and implement it. But when we don't have buy-in from the onset, we haven't agreed that we need AT from the beginning, we haven't sort of landed on the most important goals, we don't have stakeholder engagement and buy-in, then one person is really rolling a very heavy rock up a very steep hill. I've felt like Santa Claus before, delivering amazing pieces of technology all over a district. I think I'm bringing people a gift and they think I'm bringing them a rat. So the importance of a team, none of us hold the complete expertise of a child to ourselves. Parents play a role, the child themselves play a role, and the many individuals that see them throughout the day. So even though it's time consuming, it slows the process, it's expensive, trying to do this work without a team is extremely difficult. So matching technology to the user, there's a link here if you want to look at some of the assistive technology models. They're extremely simplistic. They're basically decision trees, kind of like, can the child do X or not? And you say, no, they cannot do it. So then it says, well, you must consider assistive technology. But you can look at the few models here. And then, of course, the model that I have on this page. What you see here is that matching person to technology is a pretty complex process. It asks, again, for lots and lots of data. It asks for us to be thinking about a person's age and their gender and their lifestyle and their functional needs and their abilities. It asks for us to think about the physical environment, the culture, the attitudes, even legislative and political. Oftentimes it's difficult to get assistive technology implemented when people don't understand the law and they don't understand the requirement of districts and school personnel to provide assistive technology. Cost, availability, appearance, hugely associated with stigma, comfort, all make this process a what can be a complex process. I think instead it's just a super fun design, iteration, design again, iterate, design again. Maybe that's not the actual right. It's sort of, design, try it, tweak it, try it again, tweak it. That we can kind of go into this knowing that it's a fuzzy process, but a very rewarding process when we find the right tools. So one of the most important ways for us to determine whether or not a piece of technology works is to do experimental research. And so we do, again, have decades of experimental research, and we mean high quality experimental research where we have two groups, where we potentially have like a control group and a experimental group. So some of the best research that's been done around assistive technology, for instance, they've taken maybe 30 kids in a math class and had a group where half of the half, so a quarter of the class potentially needs assistive technology, the other quarter doesn't, another quarter needs it, the other quarter doesn't, half get the treatment, the other half don't, and then you look at the results of the assistive technology. That is completely unrealistic for any of you in your classrooms to be engaging in those types of studies to determine whether or not you should be using something like text-to-speech or speech-to-text or a word bank or anything like that in your class. So instead, one of the things you can try in your class is that all students get access to the AT. And this is especially maybe when we're thinking about a general education setting where we give all students experience to the AT, and what we see is only the students with a disability or a meaningful need for the assistive technology demonstrate improvement. This is what's called a differential bounce. However, if you provide the assistive technology to the entire class and everybody does better, then you have created an unfair advantage for the children with disabilities. No, you've created an unfair advantage, yes, for the children with disabilities because everyone did better. So then you have to go back and think, well, should I just let everybody have access to the assistive technology because everyone did better? This is just a better way to teach. Or do I find a different type of support for the students with disabilities? Because I'm not trying to give them an advantage. What I am trying to do is help them. I'm trying to level the playing field. And I'm trying to make sure that what I do is fair. Another way to do this is to just simply look at the single student. Look at the student doing a task. Have the student do the task, take data, observations, quantitative, qualitative data, do the similar task with AT, quantitative, qualitative data. Do you see a differential boost? Do you see a change in how the child performs with and without the technology? And I highly recommend that you do this more than one cycle, probably 3 or 4 cycles before you decide whether or not you just had an off day with a child or the child really is demonstrating that something different does happen with the technology. I want to go back and just give you one more example about all the students experiencing assistive technology. So what could happen is you might give an assignment to the whole class, like a writing assignment, and everyone gets a grade. Then you give a similar writing assessment, a similar writing task to everyone in the class and allow everyone to use assistive technology, and you get a grade. And then you compare the grades. So if, again, 90% of the class has a grade that's pretty similar to the grade they had without the AT, and this small percentage of kids see a boost, then you have a differential bounce. You have the evidence that you need, that you haven't created an unfair situation, but you have met the needs of the specific children with the need for AT. And again, if you give the AT to everybody, it's no longer assistive technology, it's educational technology, and you've just moved into the realm of UDL. So one of the most important pieces of assistive technology is training. And training can be difficult because oftentimes when a student receives a piece of assistive technology and they're the only one using it, they need some one-to-one time to get training. When we just put a child in front of text-to-speech or speech-to-text or any types of assistive technology, We need to also make sure that we're thinking about cognitive load. So I don't want to turn on a new technology and have them engaged in an academic task at the same time. So I want them to first learn technology for the sake of technology, and then I want to integrate it into an academic or social emotional or some other kind of task that it was meant to support the child with. Or else I have potentially created a task that's too complex and too overwhelming, and you will think that the technology is failing when instead the technology is not necessarily failing, it's just too much at once. I think if we think about a video game, for any of us who have played a video game, this is a lot like starting on level 1 and getting to level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4 before we start adding in a lot more complexity and a lot more pressure and sort of academic consequences. One of the best examples I could think of about providing training, again, I'm going back to augmentative and alternative communication. One of the pieces of technology that I see fail so often, I walk into classrooms and the devices are on the shelves, and they're on the shelves at the times when I think communication is most important, when kids are sitting on the floor interacting with one another or interacting with really amazing kind of, art projects or building blocks or putting together, I don't know, I'm not trying to even think of really young things too that students might be doing, but they're doing this really great language-rich work and there's no AAC device in sight. So one of the difficult things about supporting a child with augmentative and alternative communication, but I think that we can take this lesson to all pieces of assistive technology and the ways that we support kids, is that we really have to use the equipment ourselves. We have to be experts in the equipment ourselves, and we have to model its use. We know that one of the most important teaching tools we have is modeling. So we model the use of the technology. We model it over and over again. We have peers model the use of the technology. We let kids sit back and observe that the technology is not scary, that it's not difficult, that it isn't going to cause pain, right? For many of our kids, let's say, who've already had a really painful experience with writing, you add a new technology, it doesn't all of a sudden make them super thrilled to write. So we need to allow kids sort of a period of time, if you will, to consider whether or not they want to jump in and participate. You want to give them as much power and control and choice and time to think about whether or not this is going to work for them. And this is true for our children with autism, especially. This is true for our children who are who struggle, who are not able to produce natural speech, who are nonverbal, low verbal. This is true for our children who are in TAG programs. Is that kids protect themselves. And not all of us are risk takers. Not all of us are just ready to embrace something new and give it a try and fall on our nose and fail. Most of us want some kind of reassurance from the adults around us that we're going to be successful if we attempt. So training. So one of the most important things is if we want a child to talk, this is common sense, then we talk to them. If we want a child to use sign language, use ASL, we know that we have to use ASL with them. We know we have to sign to them. We know that we can't speak to them, and magically they will respond to us with an ASL sign. That is just me saying it out loud. You're thinking that is just simply silly. Yet, when a child uses pictures to communicate or an augmentative and alternative communication device, I primarily see adults speaking to the child and then expecting the child to speak back through the device. So I have modeled to the child something they are unable to do, which is produce spoken language, and expected them to do something that I have not modeled or explicitly taught, which is respond back with pictures. And so this is the same thing with every other piece of assistive technology we can think of. How do I demonstrate, model, show children how to use it before I then ask them to use it. So if you will, I've sort of got to get a receptive understanding. And we go back to Vygotsky and we go back to that triangle where I was saying, like, it's just not magic. We don't just have a kid and a goal on the other side is that they'll communicate their wants and needs and desires. A whole bunch of stuff has to happen internally within that child. So how do we make sure that we give the proper input so that we can activate the proper cognitive and emotional processes inside of that child so that they can then produce the output that we're looking for. All right. And lastly, we need to evaluate the effectiveness of assistive technology. Sometimes we're so excited, myself included, we're so excited to finally get our hands on a piece of assistive technology. We may have written letters, we may have appealed to insurance companies, we may have set up GoTo or GoFundMe accounts. We may have written long letters to, principals and board members, and we're so excited that we get the assistive technology that sometimes after that we feel like we're done. But that is unfortunately or fortunately, it is just the beginning. So luckily, the cost of technology has come down substantially. Luckily, a lot of the technology that's now kind of sitting around in everyone's pockets can now be leveraged to support kids in schools. That's not true for all of our assistive technology needs. But there has been positive movement in terms of that. So then, how often and how will we evaluate whether or not the assistive technology is effective? And again, we shouldn't be making that evaluation the first time the child uses it. We need to give it some time. We need to be very clear in terms of the type of support and input and training we're going to provide the child. And then how will we evaluate, how will we know that we are successful? And it's an iterative process. Again, the forms and the resources that I've given you have lots and lots and lots of suggestions about how you would do that, how you would set up a trial, how you would evaluate whether or not the trial has been successful. And again, sometimes a trial is 3 different types of assistive technology in an hour, and sometimes it's 3 different types of assistive technology over 6 months. So I know that this varies hugely depending on what types of goals that we are trying to achieve and what types of technology we're trying to put into place. So this concludes class 3. I will meet you in the forums and enjoy reading your reflections, and look